The meta of multiplayer Civ 6 has come a long way from how it used to be. Stat lines which were considered impossible just a few years ago have become increasingly commonplace as the game gradually becomes more solved. Progress is slow, however. Unlike large esports titles like League of Legends or CSGO, Civilization 6 doesn't have massive data aggregators that can easily show you the win rate of every possible build. New innovations have to be passed along by word of mouth, and with how little data there is to pull from, it can be hard to sort the good strategies from the bad. Whenever a new strategy is discovered by the community, it only reveals just how much we may still be missing. Today, I'd like to cover one of the innovations that's been taking CPL by storm recently, the medieval era free inquiry strategy. For those wondering, free inquiry refers to the Golden Age dedication, which can be chosen during the classical and medieval eras of the game. This dedication grants the player bonus science equal to the total adjacency of commercial hubs and harbors in their empire, as well as granting them extra technological progress from each eureka they trigger. With this dedication, it's possible to set a pace through the tech tree that players without it simply can't match. You may be wondering, if these bonuses are so incredible, then why did it take so long for people to catch on? Aren't there literally only 4 choices for Golden Age dedications each era? To understand free inquiry's place in the meta, we first have to understand its competitors, Pen, Brush, and Voice, and Monumentality. Monumentality is simple enough. Civs with a lot of faith can use it to buy a ton of settlers and builders early, which greatly accelerates their pace. It's incredibly powerful, and obviously the first option of most religious civs. For non-religious civs, however, this dedication is worthless and can be completely ignored. Free Inquiry's cultural counterpart, Pen, Brush, and Voice, has long been the dedication of choice. Over time, Civ players have come to understand that culture is more important than science in the early stages of the game. The civics tree in the classical and medieval era has a ton of very important power spikes in the form of governor titles and policy cards like serfdom and natural philosophy. In contrast, the tech tree in the same stage of the game is mostly barren of useful technologies. For this reason, Pen, Brush, and Voice has always been and still is the preferred Golden Age dedication for the classical era of the game. For a long time, players would typically choose Pen Brush a second time in a row in the medieval era. After all, generating culture is typically more difficult than generating science, so choosing this dedication a second time while building out a ton of campuses allows players to maintain balanced stats throughout the mid-game. Recently, however, a new strategy has emerged, revolving around choosing the free inquiry dedication instead. There are actually a few reasons why players prefer free inquiry over Pen, Brush, and Voice in the second era. Firstly, science is generally the be-all, end-all of winning Civ 6 multiplayer games. After all of the military units are unlocked in the tech tree, so players need good science in order to survive. Secondly, as players improve, they've started getting further in the civics tree off of just the first Pen Brush Golden Age. In this game here, you can see that we have 106 culture by turn 52 and have already filled out nearly all of the medieval era civics. Notably, we've completed guilds already. By reaching this civic before the end of the classical era, we can slot in town charters immediately to double our commercial hub adjacency at the start of free inquiry, which doubles the science granted by the dedication. Thirdly, the community as a whole is starting to wake up to the significance of the oft-forgotten extra eureka progress granted by this dedication. You see, free inquiry grants 10% extra progress on all eurekas triggered by the player. As the game has evolved over time, common build orders have been optimized to include more eurekas than ever. Eurekas which were considered too inconvenient to trigger previously, such as ballistics, build 2 forts, and replaceable parts own 3 line infantry, have been seeming more attainable than ever recently. To understand why this is so important, let's dive into the math behind free inquiry. If we assume that we trigger every single eureka in the tech tree, then each tech will be discounted by 40%. Meaning we pay 60% of their cost. With free inquiry, however, each tech is discounted by 50%, meaning we pay only 50% of their cost. So, this 10% increase to eurekas actually amounts to a real gain of 16.67% science efficiency. The crazy thing is, it can actually get even higher. Let's look at some more cases. In Civ 6, technologies which are from a later game era than the current one cost 20% more science, while technologies from an earlier game era than the current one cost 20% less science. For reference, this strategy revolves around using free inquiry in the medieval era. If we trigger the eureka for a technology from the Renaissance era, such as siege tactics, the game will take a snapshot of the current cost of that technology and grant us progress towards completing it based on that snapshot. In the medieval era, siege tactics cost 20% more science due to it being a Renaissance era technology, so on online speed, the tech costs 440 science, and triggering the eureka in free inquiry grants us 220 science towards completing it. When the game enters the Renaissance era later, the cost of siege tactics will drop from 440 science to 360 science. However, we still retain all 220 science our eureka granted us towards completing it. That's over 60% of the cost of the tech. If we fail to trigger the eureka until the start of the Renaissance era, where free inquiry is no longer available, we will get only 40% of the current cost of the tech, which is 360. That means we'd instead only get 144 science. So while it may seem like there's no point in getting the eureka for siege tactics until we're about to research it, in reality it's much better to trigger the eureka during free inquiry than it is to wait until the Renaissance era arrives. This also works in reverse. Not only do we want to get certain eurekas early in order to have them benefit from free inquiry, we also want to delay certain eurekas that we could trigger in the classical era until we enter free inquiry in the medieval era. For instance, it's possible to build a lumber mill before the game reaches the medieval era, triggering the eureka for mass production. However, this would be wasting science, since we'd only be getting 40% of the value of mass production, which amounts to 288 science. If we instead wait until we enter our free inquiry golden age to build our first lumber mill, we get extra value on that eureka, earning 360 science instead of 288. As small optimizations like this have been discovered, the overall value of free inquiry has grown in the eyes of the strongest players in the Civ 6 community. Lastly, this strategy hasn't always been as good as it is now. Notably, BBG patch 5.2, which launched 10 months ago in March of 2023, buffed commercial hubs to gain +1 adjacency from city centers, while nerfing markets to grant 1 less gold. This buff is very significant, as every 1 point of commercial hub adjacency becomes 2 science per turn with free inquiry and the town charter's policy card. Furthermore, everything we've covered so far about the free inquiry meta has been further exacerbated by the rise of new host rules in CPL. More and more lobbies are starting to restrict the number of scientific city-states that spawn in an effort to slow games down. However, in lobbies with fewer scientific city-states, civs become even more dependent upon the bonus science granted by free inquiry if they want to keep up. Now that we know why free inquiry is good, let's look at how to best take advantage of it. One optimization we can make is to be more considerate of maximizing our commercial hub adjacencies. Once we enter free inquiry and use the town charter's policy card, each point of natural commercial hub adjacency in our empire will be converted into 2 science per turn. In the Better Balanced Game mod, commercial hubs gain 2 adjacencies from river and 1 adjacency from being next to a city center. By placing a commercial hub next to a river and a city center, and then placing 1 more district next to it, we can easily get our commercial hubs to 4 adjacency each, which results in a ton of science during free inquiry. It's important to remember that we still want to maintain some semblance of balance between our science and culture. Therefore, it's important that we put some effort into building out our cultural infrastructure. In this game, we do this by placing down some theater squares with decent adjacencies around our one entertainment complex, and running theater square projects to generate great person points and snag some great writers. Now to get into some of the controversial elements of this strategy's rise to prominence. Some civs are much better in this meta than others. At the bottom we have civs that don't generally like opening with commercial hubs or harbors. Civs like Khmer and Russia with their holy site openers, and civs like Gaul with its unique industrial zone opening, are quite bad at taking advantage of the free science granted by free inquiry. It's simply too hard to fit a large number of commercial hubs or harbors into their build order. Higher on the list, we have ordinary civs that operate just fine with a standard commercial hub or harbor opening. Hungary, England, Cree, most civs are in this category. Above them, we have civs that can run commercial hub or harbor openings and gain access to free culture. A few months ago, civs could rely on going pen, brush, and voice in the medieval era to bolster their culture, but now that free inquiry is meta, culture is at a premium. Civs like Greece and Persia are incredibly consistent, as they can reliably get very high science and culture by playing around free inquiry. At the apex, we have civs that gain free culture and extra commercial hub adjacency. The leaders Pedro II and Mbande are absolute monsters in this meta. They can get huge commercial hub adjacencies thanks to their civ bonuses, resulting in massive amounts of science from free inquiry. Both of them can also get very strong theater squares thanks to their unique districts, both of which grant major adjacency bonuses to theater squares. Lastly, these two civs both have bonuses to great person generation, allowing them to starve the rest of the lobby of great writers and artists. Remember that bit I said about culture being at a premium in this meta? Good luck bolstering your culture when there aren't any great writers left to recruit. All of this has led to the free inquiry meta being somewhat controversial. In my personal opinion, I think it's an interesting shake-up to the game. For the longest time, players would always just click the pen, brush, and voice Golden Age dedication twice in a row without even thinking about it. And now that free inquiry finally has the time to shine, all of a sudden people are up in arms about it. The loudest voices are, of course, those whose favorite civs are suffering the worst in this meta. The most common nerf suggested by this crowd is to remove the +1 adjacency commercial hubs gain from being next to the city center. So, what do you think about this whole situation? Should the better balanced game team cave into demands and nerf free inquiry strats? Or should they simply start balancing around them by buffing the civs who struggle to take advantage of the dedication? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitch to catch full games of multiplayer Civilization 6 live. Herson, signing out.